According to a 2024 APA poll, 1 in 3 Americans feel lonely every week, women at much higher rates than men. In a world that's evolved away from tribal communities and into nuclear family systems, in a world where we work remotely and where we chat, air quotes, online, how do we cultivate authentic and meaningful, lasting connections? Where do we find our people? Let's chat about it. Hello, and welcome back to The Other Way. Today, I am joined by UCLA and Pepperdine trained therapist, women's group leader, and founder, Jaimi Brooks. Jaimi works predominantly with women, and she is the founder of a beautiful communal space, The Well Lived Woman, based in Topanga. Her mission with The Well Lived Woman is to help women cultivate a life well lived through intentional practices and community. We're diving into Jaimi's own evolution of mother and therapist into founder, building a brick and mortar business. We talk about the importance of cultivating safe and welcoming spaces for women and how spirituality and connection is evolving. We also talk about the ingredients necessary for cultivating connection in a world where we feel lonelier and more disconnected now than ever. Without further ado, let's jump on into Jaimi's story and the evolution and creation of the well-lived women. Enjoy. Jaimi, welcome to The Other Way.
Hi, thank you so much for asking me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. As I mentioned, I'm such a fan of the well-lived women, not just the space, but your mission. So we have a lot to get into. But before we dive into some of the questions, I want to start with, what are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself?
Oh, wow. It probably depends on the moment, but I would say right now, I am a comfortable person. I feel comfortable in my own skin. I am creative, not so much like in the artistic kind of way, but in possibility and solutions. And that's kind of how I think of my
Mhm.
creativity. And I'm very intentional. So that comes out in all sorts of ways, sometimes annoying ways too. But yeah, I think that I'm very specific and particular in how I go about stuff.
You're a Pepperdine and UCLA trained therapist and also women's group leader. So you've worked in all these different capacities. How did founding the Well Lived Women, which is really a community space, a physical space for creativity, one of your other words, and connection, how did that come to be? Can you share with us a bit of that journey?
When I first started practicing as a therapist, I didn't seek out to only see women. Now looking back on it, I'm like, that makes so much sense. But I grew up in a beauty salon. I always wished I had a sister. My mom has a bunch of sisters, and I just only had boy cousins and brothers. And but my previous work lives before Well Lived Woman and becoming a therapist, I was also in the beauty industry. And so it's just surrounded by women. And I love it. I really do. And then I had twin boys myself. And so I think on a personal level, okay, I'm never having sisters, I'm never having girls. Let me surround myself with the most amount of women. But in running my women's groups and seeing women in my private therapy practice, there is so much that is needed to live well and so much that we crave and so many things that in trying to do all the things we end up overlooking in order to have our good lives, to curate our best experience, to have a life that we feel fully engaged in and served by, and hopefully the least amount of regretful of later. And there's no time for a lot of those things in therapy. Therapy is a lot of things, but it can't connect you with other people. And, there's not time for a lot of proactive learning in therapy. So that brought me to the Well Lived Women groups, but those are only a small handful of women at a time. I wanted there to be a physical space that could bring in all of the other parts, which, things that offer creativity and joy and professional support and financial education for women, sexual education and pleasure education for women, and time just to have fun and time to share our businesses and a place to come and purchase the things that are lovely, thoughtful gifts or things that add to your quality of life, the looking inward kind of a way, or things that are just beautiful and
Mm.
functional and don't add to the clutter and chaos of life, but where it can just be streamlined. And that's what we do at the Well-Lived Woman. We offer all sorts of experiences that change every month based on what that season and what that month craves and calls for. So that way, whatever the women who come and are drawn to Well-Lived Women are needing, they can find it there. Do you just want to do beautiful watercolors to create something just for the sake of creating, not for any other reason? Do you want to be having better sex and feel less weird about it? Do you want to invest your money and know how to be financially responsible in ways that we weren't taught? Or you want to do Moon Circle? You want to talk about getting divorced? Do you want to talk about being a new mom? It's all there.
Community is like a core part of the space. Are a lot of the themes that come up, are these themes that kind of are the circles that you wish you had? Like, where did the inspiration for the different topics come from? Are these themes that come up in your practice with women?
Well-Lived Woman is something that I wanted to exist for me. Anything that I ever create is something that I personally crave and want and find value in. And then, of course, there are things that I see as reoccurring themes with my clients and in my groups of things that people crave that maybe I already had, but more people need.
Nice. It's so interesting because you mentioned that you felt called to work with women for some time, although it may have not been that obvious from the get go, and to now be fostering communities of women. Because I think for actually a lot of women, being in community with other women can be very, very threatening. And
Mm.
I'll speak from my own experience. I've definitely had fears like that. Back to the original point around just like feeling comfortable in our own skin, I think that for a lot of women, relationships with other women can be fraught, filled with competition rather than communion, right? And so I'm curious, what have you seen in terms of the community and the circle, and especially with your background as a therapist? What do you think is contributing to some of that? Why is it that women get shitty? And then how are you avoiding that? So,
Okay.
two-parter.
Yeah. So why women like more unfavorable,
The catty
toxic?
women.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
The
there's
cattiness.
literally like an archetype of the catty women, the bitchy one, Mean Girls, right? There was a movie
I
around it even,
I
right?
think so much comes back to, I mean, I hope people are just not like recoiling, but like patriarchy. We are so strong when we are unified as women, but our world is not set up to emphasize and encourage the strengths of women. And so there's been a lot of ways from the beginning of time, from the beginning of our lives, from the oldest stories around where we've been encouraged to separate ourselves from each other and to be at odds with each other. So that way the masculine powers can be at ease and be unthreatened by equal participation from women. And so I don't even think that we know that we're do it because it's in the water that we drink from such an early time. And so what it
Mm.
requires is for us to be intentional and for us to have done some work of like what it is that we want and who it is that we want to be in the world. And there are definitely times where like I've gone to women circles or things that were made for women and like they were not women friendly and they were not warm and they were not inviting and they didn't encourage me to set down my walls or share openly. No, and it kind of goes back to sometimes people want to be cool. Sometimes people want to
Mm.
be at the top.
Mm.
And so you have to think about what it is that you want in the world and be choose the people you surround yourself with carefully, but also choose how you present yourself carefully. And in the Well-Lived Woman, it's a beautiful place, but I also chose imperfect handmade things as the materials because it is beautiful, but it's not perfect. It's not precious. I never wanted Well-Lived Women to be one more way to put forth the value of perfection on women.
Mm.
It's a place for like-minded women to come together and be their whole versions of themselves. And that is really felt by the women and they really show up in that way. We're like, you can cry and you can be upset. You can be uncertain. You can be messy or you can also be thriving. And all of those things are okay to be. And you see that in the other women, and that gives you permission too. So, like, it is just not a place where it's invited for it to be like an in club.
Yeah.
And and for the person who is the most socially significant to get different things than somebody who's just walking in. I really recognize how courageous it is to go and put yourself out there and with people that you don't know. And I really do a lot to have that be a protected space and for the intention for it to be equitable,
Yeah.
social,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
warm in its vibe. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry. I have a lot.
No, that's a fantastic. I mean, I think you bring up such an interesting point. This notion of the patriarchy on the outside and also within us in a way, right? Like the internalized patriarchy that
Yeah,
we've brought in. I think that is actually
deep.
so important to
It's
mention
deep.
because it goes back to what you were saying earlier. The judgments that we have towards ourselves that then we project onto others, like a lot of these don't even come from within us. They come from the judgment set of what's beautiful, what's cool, what's not accepted. And then it's just this, never ending illusion of if I do X or act like Y, I can be part of that accept group in a way, right? That whatever the accepted group might be. And so I think it's so powerful to name the fact that there are systems at play that go beyond us. And also, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier as you were sharing but to recognize that some of that might be internalized as well. And it shows up in the way that we judge ourselves and that we judge other women. So I think that it is I love this notion of having imperfect objects and that kind of allowance of showing up imperfectly as you are, because I think that's the very first step. If that is the culture, it sounds like you're cultivating. That is just such an invitation for everyone to show up that way.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so powerful. So, one of the things that I wanted to also explore and just to get your thoughts on is the well lived woman. I think this is pretty fascinating. It offers such a unique space for people beyond, of course, sisterhood and community and the beautiful objects that you have in the space itself. But one of the things that I find so fascinating is that we've seen over the last couple of decades, really in the last 10 years, though, this decline in institutions. So we have this decline of religion, the rise of the nuclear family. And you kind of alluded to this a bit earlier when you were talking about, as women, often the things that make us feel our best or that help us feel whole kind of fall to the wayside. So, how do we have a space to help cultivate that, which is something you're curating? And I'm curious, what are your thoughts as a therapist and also in many ways as a community leader around this rise of loneliness? Are spaces like the Well Lived Women the solution to it? Does it take more than that, more than just creating the space, right? It's fascinating to kind of reflect on with religion. You have this shared dogma, whether you agree with it or not. There's a shared belief system. And when we lived in tribes, we're all part of the same unit. Whatever the belief system is, may it be spiritual or just supporting each other. We're all part of that tribe. That's how we physically lived. But now we have this kind of situation where everyone's moved to live individually and religions are on the decline. Spirituality feels so esoteric. What does it mean? And so, what do you think? What are the building blocks of starting to fill that hole? Like when it comes to loneliness for people and feeling connected to others, and you can answer that from the perspective of the well lived women or from even your insights as a therapist, if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, actually, I have reflections on that. In the Well Lived Women group, we actually do a week on loneliness. And it's something that I feel like there's like a taboo around because there's some sort of shame that people feel in craving more connection than they have. There's some sort of suspicion that they have that something must be wrong with them or they would have the connection that they want. And that's not true. I would say most people are craving more connection. Until recently, Vivek Murthy was the Surgeon General under Biden and then before that under Obama. And loneliness is the number one health risk, like over smoking.
It's crazy.
It's you so physically. And it always like people don't always articulate it in their own mind as loneliness because there is some taboo and it feels like shameful. But it's an epidemic. And what to do about that? Dr. Murthy says that loneliness is the discrepancy between the connection that you have and the connection that you want. And so it's not even You could have a lot of connection and still feel lonely, or you could have a very compact amount of connection and not feel lonely. It's just when there's a divide between the two. And there are many different ways that we crave connection. Some of it is our intimate relationship, but that's not all of it. You know, we also want to be connected with people who enjoy the same activities. We want to be in connection with people, the friendship way of being. And then there's like the larger community aspect where there's like a common goal and purpose. There's all sorts of ways that we want to feel connected and in touch and with other people. And this is all true right alongside with technology has taken over our life. So we really want to feel connected, and we want to feel connected, more connected with our spouses than ever, or our partners, with our kids, but then also have friends, but then also have activities, and then also have a larger community. We want that. And also, we also just kind of want to be left alone at home and have our friends cancel our plans so we don't actually have to get dressed after the pandemic and then like scroll on TikTok or Instagram. There is a lot of relief
Very
that
real
happens,
description right there.
right? Like the thing, but I don't want to do the thing. And so I think that we're at odds with ourselves. We have competing desires for the connection that is more than what we have, as well as impediments for doing what we need to go about and have it.
I want to actually double down on that because you bring up such an interesting point. This dichotomy between we are feeling lonely and yet we also resist reconnecting when we have those opportunities. We have social anxieties on the rise and there's like this resistance to take this action. What do you think this is? I'm sure you must see this in practice. Is this just because of the dopamine hits we're getting from our technology? What are some of the factors at play here? And also, what should we be doing about that?
I mean, you started off before with the loss of third places. Like there's
Yeah.
not so many community centers, there's not so much churches, there're not so many things that like are gathering places. And we lost a lot of that during COVID. We also lost a lot of our habits and the momentum that we used to have of having more on our social calendar, you know,
Mhm.
and doing stuff. So both we got out of the habit of it and the places that we would go to have declined or closed. And you know, it's 5 years later, but we're still suffering the loss of that. And I know I still don't do as much as I used to do before. Like that feels unimaginable to me. I mean, that coincides with me having my boys and stuff too, but
No, but I agree with you. Even when I think about going to the office every single day, like I used to go to the
right?
work out, go to the office, get there by 8, and then work a full day, and then go to a happy hour afterwards. Or I was dating at the time. So, like a date every single night of the week. That feels complete. It feels crazy to
Crazy.
me. And I'm just like, is it because I'm a couple of years older? But I know I'm not the only
Yes.
one because the younger generation is doing the same. And I wonder, do you think it has something to do with the technology overwhelm? Like, we're just getting so much information. We're like processing things all the time that there's like a limit to how much engagement we can have.
I don't think it's any one of these things. I think it's all
Mhm.
of these things together. I think it's the aftermath of COVID, the loss of third places. I think it's the addiction to our technology and the way that it's infiltrated all parts of our life. I think it's the illusion of connection that social media gives us that
Mm.
makes us feel like we're like having a laugh with a friend, but it's not the same as actually having a laugh with a friend. It's getting out of the habit. And I think just being conscious of all of these different things helps us make thoughtful choices that actually reflect who we are and what we want.
Mhm.
And that is different than just being on autopilot and never having the opportunity to assess like the different things that are at play that have you reaching towards or away from connection.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people forget that they have agency, that it's okay. If you wish that you had more friends than you have now, you actually will that. Like it may seem like you are not because you're out of practice and you haven't made a new friend in a while. And so now you think past the part of life where you can make new friends, but you totally can. Putting yourself out there in the different ways that you can makes a difference quickly. You get a return on that quickly. It's just it feels foreign when you're out of practice.
Yeah.
Trying something new feels foreign when you can't just start something from scratch. You can't
Yeah.
just go out there and learn whatever the
Yeah.
things. Like who do you think you are? But like you can.
I love that. It makes me think of there's something about putting in effort in the first place that is part of the reward system, right? There is something to putting in the extra love and care and effort. There's so much research out there that shows that doing things for others, if you volunteer or if you make something from scratch and give it to somebody, there's so much more joy and reward from that
Mm,
process versus just like outsourcing it. It just makes me reflect on, it's almost like that is like a contributing factor to some of the loss where there's this barrier that we feel between, okay, there aren't the spaces and I have this slight, I think everybody has a tech addiction, right? So I'm scrolling and I'm getting dopamine and it's harder for me to pull away and I feel uncomfortable, so I want to get that dopamine hit again to help myself with that. But then on the other hand, putting in the effort feels like almost like a taller mountain to climb, but it's almost like the effort becomes part of the reward in the sense of having that agency and actually doing the thing and really putting yourself out there, which I think is could be a powerful reframe for people.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And it doesn't
so
have to feel
powerful.
comfortable in order
Yeah.
to start it, like, to just expect things to feel I randomly it's probably not random, probably a lot of people feel this way, but if I haven't been somewhere before, I'm like, "Nah, that's too much trouble." I don't like, what is the trouble? Driving somewhere new? Putting the address into the thing? Like, going into a room I don't know what it looks like? What is the trouble? But in my mind, I'm like, "We'll do that on a different day where
Not on a
I
school night, God
can do
forbid. On a
something new." So weird.
There is a really good, have you heard of 4,000 Weeks, the book, by the way? Have you heard of that one? Oh
No,
my gosh,
4,000 feet.
highly recommend.
Is it
I'm
fiction or
raving about it.
nonfiction?
It is nonfiction, but kind of
Oh, it's
yeah,
4,000 weeks, how long we get to
4,000
be
Weeks.
alive for?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that's
okay.
the book, that's the book. Sounds
Yeah,
intimidating, but it is so good, and there's a chapter in there that talks about the inconvenience of convenience and, like, what we're losing by that. It kinda
yeah,
speaks to what you were just mentioning. No, not on a school night. I mean, I so resonate with this. There are many things that feel like they can't happen on a school night, but there is something lost with the sourcing the things that we don't like, and it speeds up our world, and it causes us to have this experience like the world is moving at a faster pace, and by doing that, we are actually missing out on the wu-wei experience of just being, and, like, just
yeah.
washing the dishes because your dishwasher isn't working, just, like, driving to the place to do that uncomfortable thing.
I think that we in our mind pair convenience with fulfillment somehow, or we forget about fulfillment being its own thing. Like, we get to decide what matters. Convenience and fulfillment, having a convenient life is not the same thing as having a fulfilled life. And so we often opt for convenience, forgetting that probably doesn't even move the needle on what feels good to us. And
Mhm.
often the things that are the most fulfilling are not convenient. Something that I think is so interesting that I really try to remember and act on behalf of. The things that you like the most are not the things that bring you the most happiness.
Mm.
Having novelty brings you the most happiness and fulfillment. And so, like, to go to the same dinner, like your favorite place, and eat your favorite thing every Friday night, on one hand, why would I want to go anywhere else? It's my favorite and I love my thing. That's the best. But in your mind, it almost like condenses as one thing.
Mm.
And if you were to go to a different restaurant every Friday night, and some of them are shitty and you don't like them and the food wasn't even that good, but, like, you'll remember it differently as more fulfilling and it will bring more happiness. And so trying to, like, try new stuff and make ourselves uncomfortable and see new things and be alive in our lives. That's where
Mhm.
the novelty does, is that it makes us alive in our life.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of makes me think I am a founder, I'm not a mother, but I imagine that, like they say, motherhood or building a company, like some of the toughest, least convenient things in life, right? There's, like, the growing period, the birthing period, the raising them period. All of these things are hard and yet can be so rewarding, and same with building a company. I imagine there are many things that are not convenient. Figuring out how to run a business in the midst of fires is not convenient,
Yeah.
but as you move through it, I assume that it actually feels quite rewarding. That's the whole thing about the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to ask you about your thoughts around religious spaces. As we know, have severely declined. What do you think is the next opportunity in terms of evolution of spirituality? Spirituality can mean astrology for some people, it can mean sound healing for others, full moon circles, like all these things seem to be practices to help people connect to some sort of universal consciousness or belief system. And I'm curious, what are your perspectives on the evolution of what spiritual practice will look like or what you see that becoming, especially considering that you have a space that introduces some of these topics at the Well Lived Women?
I don't know that I have a really well thought out answer for like where spirituality is going to evolve
What about
to.
for you personally?
I think what I hope for people is for them to feel that they can pull together something that feels comforting to them as far as spirituality goes. So they can feel connected and safe in the world and is like a framework for understanding, like being human, which is really complicated and a lot of times painful. And I don't think that there's a right way to it. I don't think that there's a right religion. I don't think that like I personally believe in God and I think that there's a lot of comfort, but which God and how and, can that be with astrology and can that be with meditation and can that be with hedonism? Yeah, like I feel like it can. I feel like it all can. And I also think that like it's a part of the human experience for these things to come in an ebb and flow in your life, and for there to be different seasons and different things that you gravitate to different parts in your life and find comfort in at different parts of your life. And for it to be okay for it to recede for a while too. And then you have like a growth spurt or something where you're like trying new things and expanding and learning. I don't really think that's answering what your question is. But
No, I mean, I think it's an interesting view on it. I feel like there's an absolutely a gap here in the world, which is about 30% of Americans identify as spiritual but not religious. And there's like a wide range as to what does that even mean and what does
yeah.
that even look like. And I think that part of cultivating community and feeling connected to people is deeply tied to a shared belief system, some sort of practices or rituals, right? That is what organized religion was giving people as well. There was some ritual and routine to your belief system, to your community. There was something that was shared there. And now that we're kind of living in a world that is a bit more individual, there is an aspect of that being a bit lost. How do
hmm
people connect in this way where everyone can have a different definition of what that means? How do you find connection and community and progress your own evolution as like a spiritual being when it isn't organized like that? This is something I noodle on all the time. I'm obviously a huge meditator. I think I mentioned the silent retreat. Not do it. I definitely will do that again, but I did it. I did it once, plan to do it again this year. There are so many lineages of Buddhism, but I don't know that I don't fully identify as like a Buddhist. And there's so many other practices that I feel drawn to that I resonate with. And there is just this aspect of you have like a little bit of community here, a little bit of community there. And how do you find that essence of more of like a shared belief system? I wonder what that will look like in the next couple of
Yeah.
years because I do think that will shift. I definitely do.
It's a really good question and it's a big question. And I'd be curious of what the forefront spiritual thinkers think of that. But I think that what organized religion offered or does offer the people that it does is like a responsibility to show up
Mm,
and the continuity of it, because other people are
yeah.
expecting you. And so therefore, like you're held accountable to yourself in a different way that, like when things get really busy and like when we're cobbling together our own spirituality, it can be hard to be accountable to ourselves
Yeah.
through the highs and lows in a way that like religion provides a framework that makes that really, really rooted and
Yeah.
established. But there's just a lot of ways where like organized religion has and continues to hurt people and disinclude people. And so it's sad that we don't get to have the good parts.
Or maybe
Most
we
of us.
will in the next few
Maybe we
years.
will.
Let's see
Yeah.
what happens. I think you're exploring some of that, like, with a space that offers, like, a window into this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's
And
really
I
good.
think everybody's also collectively and it is rapidly changing times. Like there's a lot of things that used to be that are no longer. And I don't know, it's a time of change. There's like a lot of
Yeah.
burning down of the old and not yet, the new hasn't replaced it yet.
Yeah, moving into the new paradigm, as I hear in human design. Okay, so I would love to chat with you for hours, but we are coming up on time. So I would love to ask you, where can people find you? Where can they find the Well-Lived Woman?
Yeah. I mean, you can find us at welllivedwoman.com and our monthly events are all listed on there. You can shop from there. And I also, if I don't say so myself, write a really good weekly newsletter that curate the things that I'm thinking of for a life well lived. I get a lot of joy from writing that. So you can sign up for the newsletter, which comes out every Sunday. You can find us on Instagram at Well Lived Woman, and my personal one is Jaimi Brooks, Jaim. And we always have different things every month. You know, some of them are virtual and some of them are in person, but hopefully people will find and are drawn to the things that will support them and having their life well lived.
I love that. Thank you so much,
Yes,
Jaimi.
thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into The Other Way. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast grow, and I'm ever so grateful. If you want to stay connected, you can find information on how in our show notes. And finally, if you're curious about inflow and want free resources around cyclical living or moon cycles, check out inflowplanner.com. And of course, for all my listeners, you can use the code podcast10 for 10% off any purchase. All right, that's all for today. See you next time.